All right, dudes, we get to talk about everyone's favorite division because no one can win 10 games in this division. So it's always close, always fun to talk about. It is the NFC South. Look, we saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They literally just went to everyone who was up for a contract extension, said resign, resign,
Pretty
resign.
much.
Thanks for getting in line. Bye, guys. So we know they have a lot of last year's roster coming back. What else do you think they need to do right now? What's their biggest need?
Yeah, Breeze, they did a lot of business with some homegrown players. We talk about Mike Evans and then Baker Mayfield, who wasn't homegrown, but kind of embodied what the Bucs were trying to be going forward. And then they also franchise tag Antoine Winfield Jr. When you look at this team, I think trading away Carlton Davis was a big loss for them. I think corner's the major need for this team. Also, some edge help, right? They lost Shaq Barrett. They had to cut him because his cap number was so high. I think they need somebody opposite of Yaya Diaby. Joe Tryon has been a good supplemental piece. I think he could be a third guy, but I think they need to draft a guy also that could potentially be a starter. Need some help on the D-line and potentially O-line. So they have a lot of holes as well. I think more interior offensive line they need some help with, an interior D-line. But their major needs to me is corner and edge defender.
Yeah, it is weird they traded away Carlton Davis, and I think they signed Amik Robertson, who's a spot starter for the Raiders, played a lot.
Well, no, he went to Detroit.
Oh yeah. So you're still.
So they'll be together in Detroit. Yep.
Yeah. I'm looking at. I got my Carlton Davis, Robertson. The Buccaneers traded traded Carlton Davis to the Lions. Yeah. No, I was looking at who he was paired with. But with the Buccaneers, they definitely need edge help when you let Shaq Barrett walk in free agency, Devin White. And obviously we saw Devin White has been all over the place. He had a couple years where he looked great, didn't look so good last year. But I feel like the good news, if you're going to have two weaknesses in the NFC South, maybe pass rushing and corner aren't so bad because it's not like you have, it's not like Bryce Young's dicing you up for 400 yards. You have Kirk Cousins coming off the torn Achilles. And, of course, Derek Carr seems like he's learning the ropes of the Saints offense. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you. Those are the two biggest needs. But, if you're playing in the AFC West and those are your two biggest needs, or you're going against Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, if you're in the AFC, those are two rough needs. But in the NFC South, they could win the division even with the roster they have right now. All right, let's go to the New Orleans Saints. Look. They were in cap hell this offseason. The really only thing they've done is
every year.
Yeah, every year. They just keep kicking the can ahead. But they did manage to sign Chase Young. That's about all they've done. What do you think their biggest remaining need is?
Yeah, it's offensive tackle without a doubt. They need to actually take a flyer and try to draft 2 or 3 offensive tackles because when you look at Ryan Ramczyk, there's question marks whether he could even play again, right? So, and then Trevor Penning, who they took a few years ago in the first round, has really struggled at the left tackle position. So offensive tackle for the Saints. And then when you look at it, receiver could be, they did lose Mike Thomas, even though he hasn't been himself the last three years. I really love Olave and Rashid Shaheed. I think they could add one more receiver. Now they did sign Cedric Wilson, who was an underrated signing for me. I really like his game as well. And then maybe safety, they did lose Marcus May. And corner, they lost Isaac Yeadham, but they still have Paulson Adebo. And then what's my other guy? Marshawn Lattimore. I think getting another corner in there and another safety makes sense. But again, Brees, I would not be surprised if their first 2 picks are offensive tackles.
Yeah, it's really crazy, the Ryan Ramczyk stuff, because it kind of came out of nowhere that, he was dealing with the knee thing, but we're in April and we're talking about him maybe missing the entire 2024 season.
Correct.
And that is just, that's a tough thing to come back from. Fortunately, the Saints are getting this news before the draft. And like you said, they're picking 14th overall, and they're it's a very deep draft when it comes to tackles.
Spot to take a good tackle.
So who do you like? Who you sending to New Orleans? Who's going to?
So that's that sweet area where I was talking about Troy Fontenot, Talise Fuaga make a lot of sense in that area too.
We already sent him to Seattle, dudes. We sent him to Seattle.
Okay, well, I mean, if Talise Fuaga is there, if the Jets don't take him at 10. It makes a lot of sense there, too. J.C. Latham is another guy. Some people may be like, that's a little rich, but I don't think it is. I think J.C. Latham, especially if you're trying to change the attitude of that team, it makes a lot of sense there as well.
Yeah, and, it's funny because you mentioned receiver and offensive tackle. You have Derek Carr. This is what makes me iffy on the Saints is that, look, Derek Carr is not good under pressure. And if he doesn't have receivers to throw to, how can you trust him to run that offense? So
it's going to be tough. So they were the team, Brees, when we were doing like grades. People asked me like, what was the one team that you would say are losers of free agency? I said the Saints, because like they're always in cap purgatory, and there's no way you see what the Bucs and the Falcons did, and even the Panthers, and just stay pat with your team thinking that you're going to make a run. Like, what are they doing? Like, eventually you got to stop kicking the can down the road. Take your tussin, or as my mom said, take your medicine, and struggle for 1 year and get off of those contracts.
Yeah, or do what the Rams kind of did that. They said, hey, we're going to take these huge dead cap hits. We'll hope the rookies can carry us, and the rookies did carry them. That's what you have to do. You got to just say, you know what, we're going to survive with our rookie class 1 year. All right, let's move to the Atlanta Falcons. What a wild offseason they have had. They have new quarterback. I'm sure you heard about that. His name is Kirk Cousins. They did a lot. They have new weapons for Kirk Cousins. Darnell Mooney's there. What do you think their biggest need is they still need to do?
Yeah, edge without a doubt. At the number 8 pick, I think Dallas Turner is the pick. Arnold Ebiketie, who they took a few years ago, took a big step last year, but they need to pair him with somebody on the opposite side. D-line could be Grady Jarrett getting up there in age, David Onyemata getting up there in age. They could potentially take that, or even corner, right? You need somebody opposite of A.J. Terrell. Clark Phillips can play in the slot, but I think you need another corner. And then I would say receiver, but the Randall Moore, trade kind of solidified that with Darnell Mooney as well. And then, you still have Drake London at receiver as well. So to me, their biggest thing is edge defense, especially with the Raheem Morris defense. You need somebody that can create havoc off the edge.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me that they haven't really done anything on defense. Obviously, you mentioned Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, Ray McLeod. So they've added 3 receivers. They added a quarterback. They signed a tight end, Charlie Warner. And then you have, obviously, Kyle Pitts, Drake London. You mentioned London. So you have all these offensive weapons, and you have this defensive coach who just didn't really say, hey, we're going to go out and get these studs. And I feel like it's hard to be a defensive-minded head coach when you don't have a good pass rush. And it doesn't seem like the Falcons have that right now. So you think that would be the obvious thing they do at number 8?
Yeah, for sure. I think, again, Dallas Turner makes too much sense. A guy that, grew up in Florida but went to Alabama, which isn't that far from the ATL. And we look at Raheem Morris, he did kind of inherit a pretty good defense. I think they were middle of the pack and at times played better than middle of the pack defense. I think Jesse Bates was a major get in free agency. The Bengals are probably kicking themselves from letting him walk out, especially with the failed experiment with Dax Hill and other guys at the safety position in Cincinnati. So when you look at it, Raheem Morris says, I got some foundational pieces. I got Grady Jarrett right in the middle. I also have A.J. Terrell on the outside. I have Jesse Bates. I have some foundational pieces. I just need to add a couple guys here in the draft, and we'll get back to playing like we did when we were with the Rams. And you talked about all the offensive weapons. If Kirk can just steer the ship, I think them and the Bucs have to be the 2 favorites to win the NFC South.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And adding offensive weapons can help the defense because you're not going 3 and out all the time. The defense is actually getting some rest.
Or turning the ball over as much as Desmond Ridder was.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that maybe that is part of the plan. Let's move to the final team in the NFC South. I don't know what they're doing. Brinson thinks they're having a good offseason. What do you think, dude?
Well, at first he was mad, but I think they've actually, for where they were at, it's been a respectable offseason for them because you go from losing Brian Burns, which for the life of me, you could have got 2 first-round picks for him a few years ago. My thing is if you weren't going to pay him, why not do it? But if you look at what they've done, right, they brought in DJ Wanham. They signed to Davion Clowney. They signed Chason, right, traded for Deontay Johnson. They needed a receiver. A lot of the issues that they had, they brought in 2 offensive guards and paid them top dollar money to protect Bryce Young, especially in the middle, right? Because that's where that interior pressure comes quicker than anything. They solidified those guard spots. So I actually think they've had a respectable offseason, which at first when I saw that they were losing Brian Burns and Jeremy Chin and Frankie Louvu, I'm like, hold on, the defense was the strength of your team. Why are you letting all your best players walk out the door? But they signed some respectable players to replace them. So I'm not mad at the Panthers offseason. The way they got there was bizarre. I think it's the biggest thing, Breach.
Yeah, and I think just the fact that the Brian Burns trade came so early kind of left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. As you said, Brinson did a pretty good job of selling on why it has been a decent offseason for them so far. And you mentioned the guard signings. Robert Hunt got the $100 million contract.
Woo, goodness gracious.
And those you can't have, and the other one was Damian Lewis. You can't have those two blow up in your face. So Bryce Young can't be on his back every play when you're spending $150 million on your guys. I do think they probably could use some tight end help. And I know you mentioned
I was going to say tight end for sure.
Yeah, tight end and receiver. So you need to just get Bryce Young somewhere. You got him the offensive line. So now he's going to have time to throw, but who's he throwing to? And what's going to happen?
Their first pick is until the second round, right?
Yeah.
Xavier Legette, if he's there, man, makes a lot of sense for them. Homegrown guy too.
So you have, let's see, the Panthers. Whew. Do you think they did enough to contend for the division, or do you think?
No. This is a process with Mr. Canales. This is with Dave Canales. It's gonna take a while to build this thing the right way. Even though they did bring in some quality players, right? It's all about meshing and gelling. It's gonna take at least I would say 2 years for them to even be talked about in regards to maybe competing for the NFC South.
Dudes, are you telling me you are not going to sprinkle any money on Carolina to win the Super Bowl?
Not at all. Not at all.